My name is Hans Brandeis. I'm living in Berlin, Germany. By profession, I'm an ethnomusicologist and I specialized in the traditional music of the indigenous people of the Philippines. And on a wider scale also in traditional music in Southeast Asia in general. I made 15 research trips to the Philippines, comprising all in all about 4 years. My first trip was in 1976 when I visited the Higaonon of Agusan del Sur in Mindanao. In the 1980s I made a comprehensive survey of the music culture of all the Binukit-speaking peoples, the Bukidnon, Higaonon, Talaandig and Banwaon of northern and central Mindanao. In the 1990s I started researching on the two-stringed boat lutes of the Philippines, which nowadays can only be found in Mindanao and Palawan. People usually call these instruments kutyapi, although there are many other names, depending on the IP groups using them, like katyapi, kusyapi, kutapi, piapi, kuglung, kudlung, kudyung, hagelung, fagelung, fögereng, and others. My interest in Philippine music at first started out of merely practical reasons. During my university studies in 1975, I reached the point where I had to decide on which musical cultures of the world I should focus. My sister married a Filipino in 1969, and she lived in Pasay City at that time. The Philippines are an English-speaking country, and first of all, while writing a paper on Philippine musical instruments for my studies, I realized how little had been written about Philippine music in general, so that I found it worth making my own contribution by digging out some of those cultural treasures that had not been documented by anybody yet. As a consequence, I made my first field trip to the Philippines in 1976. Regarding the music itself, I was not particularly attracted to it. I had heard some record albums of Maguindanao and Hanuno Mangyan music, but everything sounded very exotic and alien to me. But I knew, like in the case of other kinds of music, like free jazz or classical music, by listening to it day and night, I would develop a personal relationship towards it. As a musician, I used to play guitar and a little bit of Indian sitar. Therefore, when I read articles on Philippine musical instruments, I immediately felt attracted by the two-stringed lutes, generally known as kutyapi. For me, these lutes are the most interesting of all musical instruments in the Philippines. First, because they show the greatest variety in their designs. Second, they show the most complicated technology. And third, the highest number of different materials are used for making them. Boat lutes can be found among at least 38 different ethnic groups in the Philippines, showing a variety of at least 21 different designs. This means just by looking at the design of a particular instrument, you can usually determine which ethnic group made it. In this sense, the specific designs of boat lutes are cultural identifiers. Just like the traditional attires of the tribal people, which are specific to each tribe, boat lutes clearly express the cultural identity of their owners, whether they are Maguindanaon, Tiboli, Manobo or Mansaka, just to name some examples. All boat lutes in the Philippines, with only one exception, have two strings. One for playing the melody, the other one for providing the drone sound. Some people have been suggesting that the two-stringed design of their kutyapi might be related to some indigenous belief of a twin cosmic unity of opposite forces that hold the fabric of the universe, like men and women, force and tenderness, positive and negative, continuity and change. This might be true to some extent, although during my research I have not heard anything about the specific symbolic meaning of the two strings. Basically, the main features of Philippine boat lutes come from India, where the concept of melody and drone is very obvious in string instruments. And it should be stressed that all the other boat lute traditions in Southeast Asia follow the same system of having two strings. Therefore, this fact is nothing specifically Philippine. In Indian music, the drone sound symbolizes the Om sound, which is considered sacred in Hindu religion. According to Hindu belief, before the creation of the universe, there was only emptiness. Then, the divine consciousness took form and shaped into the vibration of the sound Om, filling the whole universe and constituting its fundamental basis. In that sense, the drone sound of the Philippine boat lutes might also symbolize the eternity of the universe, while the melody string might symbolize the changes of time. But this is mere speculation, and the tribal people did not mention anything about this. Only Sama'un Sulaiman, the Magindanaon master of the Kutyapi, mentioned that paradise is filled with the sounds of the Kutyapi, just like our world is filled with air. Regarding the symbolic meaning of boat lutes in the Philippines, we have to state that they usually represent animals. The big lutes, usually crocodiles, buaya, or monitor lizards. The smaller ones, roosters, herons, or other birds. This shows the close relationship of the boat lutes with nature. Also, many boat lute tunes imitate animal sounds. All Philippine boat lutes are made out of one single block of wood. Their bodies are always hollowed out from the back and covered with a wooden board. Aside from this common feature, there are basically two different kinds of boat lutes in the Philippines. There is a bigger kind with the frets mainly on the body, which is used by the Magindanaon, Maranao, Bukidnon, most Manobo groups as well as the Palauan, and there is a smaller kind with most of the frets on the fingerboard or on the neck. This type of lute is used by the Tiboli, Blaan, Ubo, Takakaolo, Tiruray, Mansaka, Mandaya, Tibabaon, Manguangan, Agusan Manobo, Subanon and others. The big lutes of course produce a deep sound and a slower kind of music, while the smaller lutes have a higher pitch and produce faster and more lively tunes. There are also different patterns how the frets are placed, which produce different scale and melodies. There are also considerable differences in the way the music is performed. In most cases, a boat lute player is a solo performer. Sometimes he dances along with his own playing, or sometimes accompanies another dancer. However, among several Manobo groups like the Ata, Matiksaluk or Tikwahanon, the boat lute called kuglung is combined with a bamboo zither called soluray, which is played by a woman. Usually it's the woman singing, sometimes also the man, and both usually dance along with their own music. Regarding the playing technique, most tribes use plectrums, small slices of rattan, bamboo, nowadays also plastic, which are tied to the index or middle finger of the right hand. Only very few use their plain fingers for strumming the strings, like the Subanon and Akusan Manobo. These use their thumbs, and the Palawan the little finger of their right hand. This again produces different sounds and styles. Boat lutes are not only used in the Philippines. You can also find them in Sumatra, Borneo, Sulawesi, and on the small Indonesian island of Sumba. Additionally, there are zithers which are placed on the ground but which are closely related to the boat lutes regarding their design. These can be found on mainland Southeast Asia, in Myanmar, Thailand and Kampuchea. Most of these lutes also have two strings. Only the lutes in Borneo have developed from originally 2 strings to now 4 or even 6 strings. Again, there are differences, very small and very big lutes, instruments with or without frets, played either with the help of a plectrum or with the plain fingers. And again, this variety results into many different musical styles, which as can be clearly seen in the case of Borneo, also change in the course of time. Boat lutes are hardly known outside of Southeast Asia. Even modern Filipinos might just have heard the term kutyapi but don't know anything about the great variety of these instruments. It seems that only the big sape or sampe lutes of Borneo have gained some wider recognition, as they have adjusted to the signs of time. They are usually played with built-in electric pickups by using amplifiers. They are now often used in bands with electric guitars, bass guitars, keyboards and drums, where they play a mixture of folk-style songs and pop music. But although boat lutes are little known, Western audiences react to this kind of music with a lot of interest and joy. This was very clear when a group of Tivoli women visited Paris in 2010 for a period of 4 weeks, where they performed at a museum, at a theater, during a folk music festival, and right in the streets of Saint-Denis for the people passing by. In the Philippines, there has been a kind of awakening during the past years, a growing interest for traditional boat lutes, and a good number of musicians have incorporated boat lutes into their repertoire, like Diva Felipe de Leon with his Hagalung project, his group Makiling, jazz musician Bob Abes, Joy Ayala, Popong Landero, Pinik Pigan and many others. However, these musicians usually do not rely on the music traditions where these instruments originally come from. They neither learn the traditional playing technique with its intricate details, nor do they learn the traditional songs. In the villages of the indigenous people, more and more masters of the boat lutes are passing away. And it's just a question of time until most of this music will have disappeared. Among the Maranao, Bukidnon, Higaonon, Talaandig, Western Bukidnon Manobo, Akusan Manobo of Mindanao, and among the Tacbanwa and Batak of Palawan, boat lute music is about to be forgotten, or has already gone forever.